If you really want to improve your golf swing, then getting your backswing correct can reap huge benefits in terms of how the rest of the swing progresses. But I see so many golfers making common mistakes in the takeaway, which are destroying the chances of building a consistent swing. And the sad thing is, so many of these mistakes could be avoided if you just knew what to do. So today I'm going to share with you how to do the takeaway, some simple tips, drills and checkpoints for you to use next time you practice to ensure you're building a perfect backswing. I want to define the takeaway part of the swing as swinging from setup to where the shaft is parallel to the ground in the backswing, a position we reference as P2 or position 2. And that's going to be the discussion point today. And so much can happen in this time and space of the swing that gets you off track that it's impossible to recover from. And yet, because this part of the swing happens relatively slowly, you're able to think about what happens here a lot more than you are through a faster portion of the swing, whether that's the downswing, the impact, or even into the follow through. The takeaway can hold some really key benefits if you can get it right. So I'm going to start by discussing how the hands and the club should move from P1 to P2. Those of you who've followed my videos for some time will recognize the diagram on the mat here. This is the grid, the stack and tilt grid built using the T-claw. And the angled lines here we have are references for the fact we swing the club on an arc. This line here is for the club head. And the one that I'm standing on is referencing the same arc for my hands. So we play golf on a tilted angle. We play golf with clubs that are bent. We don't play golf with clubs that are vertical. If we did, these lines would be straight and we'd be swinging the club straight up and down in this fashion. The fact that all of the clubs we play with are bent and we stand to the side of the ball creates the need for us to swing on this arc or this tilted angle. And that should give you some information in terms of how to do the takeaway. The hands and the club move inwards and around us, so that at P2, the checkpoints you should be looking for where the shaft is parallel to the ground is that the hands and the club have both moved around the body and that the shaft at this point in time is somewhat parallel to the target line. We're looking for the shaft to match the direction that we're trying to hit the ball. And I see so many people misinterpreting the hands-in portion of the golf swing and actually rolling the club head behind them and leaving the hands out. So at P2, where the shaft's parallel to the ground, you can see how this shaft certainly doesn't conform to the checkpoint that I just gave you. Additionally, in a good takeaway, the club face would point down towards the ground somewhat. This leading edge here of the club face that you're looking at more or less matches the angle of my spine at this point in the swing. And that would be considered a good place for you to be. If I make the improper move by rolling the club behind me, utilizing forearm and wrist motion to move this club more behind me, you'll also notice here at P2 where the shaft's parallel to the ground, the club face is now pointing up towards the sky. That's a club that's too far behind me and a club face that's too open, which is going to lead to the dreaded over the top move to try and salvage something from that swing. And yet that mistake can easily be avoided if you know where to swing to, what to practice, and how this should look. So I would summarize the mistakes that I see made in the takeaway as the golfer utilizing too much of the hands and arms and wrists here in the takeaway. They're moving the club, they're getting the motion of the club in the early part of the swing from the hands, the wrists, and the arms, instead of using more of the legs, hips, torso, the bigger muscles, if you like, to initiate the move of the swing. So in order to minimize the amount of hand and arm motion in that first part of the swing, we're going to utilize the training aid smart ball where we hold something between our arms, and that tidies up the arm and wrist part of this swing. So by taking the smart ball device and holding something between our forearms, I'm now much more encouraged to start using the knee flex change and the tilting of the spine, the left shoulder moving down, to initiate the swing. And you'll see that from P1 to P2, if I move my left knee down and my left shoulder down, I effectively move from setup to shaft parallel in one smooth, effortless motion. The distance that my forearms are apart has stayed the same because I'm still holding the ball. In the poor version of this backswing, a golfer would roll the forearms, roll the wrists and get the club more behind them, and in doing so, the elbows and forearms would get further apart and they would drop the ball. You'd also see how the upper body hasn't moved in the same way that I just described, with very little tilting occurring. Something to take note of would be that from this front view, from P1 to P2, over 50 degrees of shoulder turn happens in this first section of the swing. That's more than half of the shoulder turn taking place in the very first part of the golf swing. And once again, I'll reiterate, because we do this part of the swing slowly, we can be much more diligent, much more aware of exactly what our body's doing to make changes to this part of the swing much faster than you can make changes to a part of the swing that's happening much more quickly. And I wanted to share with you one final thing that I learned regarding the wrists in the takeaway that I learned this week about my own swing that I thought was extremely interesting. And I only found out because I was wearing the Hack Motion wrist sensor for another video that I was making. And I discovered that between setup, where this lead wrist has a small amount of extension or cupping, has a tiny amount of extension in it because of how I grip the club. So we're looking at the device there. It's got 14, 15, 16 degrees of extension. When I swing from P1 to P2, I feel like I don't change my wrists at all. So in my mind, the feeling is that I'm keeping this entire relationship the same, and I'm tilting my body to the ground. That's really my takeaway feel. The left shoulder, the left chest, if you like, where my stack and tilt emblem is on my shirt here, I'm moving that down towards the ball or down towards the ground. That's my feel. And I was very surprised to see that between this P1 position, again, 16 degrees of extension, and P2, where I feel no change in my wrists, my lead wrist is now flexed 21 degrees. That's a 35-degree twist of the shaft. That's a change in this wrist angle that I don't even feel. And it was very interesting speaking to students about this, because when it comes to the wrists, you don't know what you don't know. You just swing in a way that's familiar to you. Your wrists are twisting and moving throughout the entire swing. And because your golf swing feels comfortable and is familiar to you, you just continue to think that that's the way to move the club. For me, it was so interesting to learn that over time, through practice and becoming a relatively skilled golfer, I've naturally developed this small amount, or medium amount, I suppose you could argue, of wrist twist in my takeaway that I didn't even know I was doing. And I think that speaks very clearly to how so many of you need to have a very different feeling in your swing in order to create that desired outcome that you're looking for. So final time, checkpoints P1 to P2, left shoulder goes down, left knee goes down, that's the tilt, the right leg straightens slightly, and when the shaft is parallel to the ground, the shaft is more or less on the target line, and we have this club face or this leading edge pointing down towards the ground, which, as I say, sort of more or less matches my spine angle. And from there, once you have that in place, you can go ahead and just hit some shots, trying to mimic the feel of the tilt in the backswing, replicating the P2 and following through onto the other side. So make sure you film yourself from down the line next time you practice. Look for those checkpoints to be in place at P2. The arms are close together, you're squeezing that ball, the club face is looking down towards the ball, and the shaft is on the target line. If we get that location locked in, it's so much easier to keep moving this club around us on the grid, continue to conform to the club path and the hand path. Get the first bit wrong, poor arm mechanics, poor tilts and structure of the body, and you'll spend the rest of the swing fighting to get back to the ball. So start as you mean to go on, get the takeaway right, and reap the benefits throughout the rest of your swing. So some useful checkpoints there for you to look out for next time you're practicing. Getting the club and the hands to trace the grid from P1 to P2 can have enormous benefits on what happens in the rest of the swing. And while we can acknowledge that not everybody does the backswing in the way that I described, building a technically and geometrically sound takeaway will likely have big benefits to your golf game. Think about it like this: weird backswings can certainly work, but if you have a weird backswing and it's not producing the ball flight that you want, it's probably time to change it. If you enjoyed the video today, please let me know by hitting the like button and getting down in the comments and letting me know your thoughts. If you're new to this channel, I'd appreciate you hitting the subscribe button as well. We're getting pretty close to that 5,000 subscriber number, and I'd appreciate your help in getting us there. Anyone interested in learning more about the Hack Motion wrist device that I was using in the video can take a look at their website. I'll leave the link down in the description. There's also a discount code that you can use should you want to purchase one. I've made many other videos for Hack Motion, and I'll also link those down in the description as well. They talk extensively about the action of the wrists throughout the swing and how you can utilize that device in order to improve your golf. If you're ready to learn more about stack and tilt and how the grid can help you to build a more repeatable golf swing and a more predictable outcome to your shots, then why don't you go and check out this video that I made, which talks about how Rory McIlroy and other PGA Tour pros are using the information within the grid to help them build a powerful and repeatable golf swing.